Take it away, brother.
Hi, church. Happy Sunday to all of you. Our sermon today, Press On with Your Soul, is the fourth in a series of Press On. This is based on FCC's theme verse of the year, which is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. We press on by continuing to be servants of God in our family, our church, our workplace, our schools, and our community. If there are some of us who, until do not know the difference between the soul and the spirit, we probably would be partly enlightened today. Here are some thought provoking questions that many of us have in mind. Is the real you a special substance that is non physical and immortal, like the soul or the spirit? Most likely, the theologian and the scientist will disagree in their answers. So, what are you? A body alone that is dead forever once it dies, or a soul temporarily inhabiting a body? Soul and spirit are sometimes used in the Bible interchangeably, that a new believer, was so anxious about this question that he went to see the pastor and asked him, Pastor, which one goes to heaven, my soul or my spirit? I don't think Pastor Patrick will go lengthily discussing with us which one goes to heaven, but most likely, Pastor can diagnose and show the way for us, how we can tell if we're living by our soul or spirit. Sometimes it can be hard to tell whether we're living and doing things in our soul or in our spirit, right? Before I muddle up with these questions with my non-theological answers, let's welcome Pastor Patrick to show how we can press on with our soul in serving God in FCC, our family, and the community where we are. Welcome po, Pastor Patrick.
Thank you, Ian. And if all can hear me, just confirm by waving. Thank you. That's good. I am never sure if I am well connected or not. Uh, this morning I tried using a wire, a cable to connect to make sure, but I forgot that I had changed to a new laptop and it won't receive the cable anymore. So back to wireless. Yeah. Um, I've been a pastor for so long, you can see from my age, but there was a year when I decided to do something else. And that year, I have a memory, uh, the memory of the furthest delivery I made. That's because that year I was in London, Ontario, and then just before working with the Alliance Church there, I went ahead and took a year to do something else. No retail stores were willing to hire somebody of my age. So I ended up doing courier work, very local. We just went around the small city. But one day, the farthest assignment I got was to deliver to Mississauga. And that became a memory to me because it was rare. It was very, very rare. Anyway, that was long ago in 2008. My question to myself was, and it still is, can I glorify God when I am driving alone? Of course, when I'm driving, in response to Ian, in the car, I've got both my body and my soul. Along in the car, I've got my spirit and everything, because there's really, in God's creation, no division. My soul is in my body, and my body is in my soul. It's all one thing to God. That's why when we are resurrected, 1 Corinthians 15, and a lot of the Bible, it's our bodies that are resurrected. And just like Jesus, whose body was resurrected, and some people tried to touch it. Anyway, Could I glorify God when I was driving alone? There was no chance to witness to anybody. We used a radio to communicate, and my usual responses to the dispatcher was simply to say, 10-4, got it. And those are the usual things. Uh, so what's the way to glorify God when you're working Monday to Friday? It doesn't even have to be Monday to Friday. Some people work on weekends, like right now. So how do you do that? By being a good example? Do you try to uh, make sure people see you doing things? Or do I have to wait for Sunday when I can give an offering? Whatever tip they might have given me in Mississauga, I could take some of that and give it in the offering on Sunday. So can you glorify God when you're at school or at work or even at play? When you're at home doing dishes? Do you have to have a background of gospel music playing while you're doing the dishes so that you can glorify God? Do you have to be praying while driving? Maybe you do a lot of typing, so would you need to be praying while typing? I couldn't do that. I'm not a multitasker. And they were wise not to hire me at McDonald's because it would have been a disaster. Not a multitasker at all. I do one thing at a time. And, and so now I'm speaking, and that's it. So, going to Ephesians chapter 6, what I would like to do is focus on what Paul told the slaves, because slaves were the workers. But I'm too tempted. I can't avoid saying something about parents, because it begins with children, obey your parents. And then, what verse is this? Um, Verse 4, it says, Fathers, do not exasperate your children. And the way Paul speaks in his time and culture, the fathers refers to the parents. Okay? Um, just like when Paul writes to the different churches, he will call them brothers. But it means everybody. It means both brothers and sisters. It's not an insult to the women. It's just the cultural uh, environment of the Apostle Paul. Long ago, that's just the way it was. Just as today, people will still call the chairman of the board a man, a chairman, even though it might actually be a woman. But anyway, so fathers, parenting, I can't avoid that. So I've got to say just a little bit for a minute here that parenting, when you do that for God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, um, there has to be in parenting this goal of disciple making. This is a way to offer our daily parenting to God. Maybe you are grandparenting like me. So similarly, you would pray and you would make sure you don't forget that you are not just raising somebody to be a successful person and then the parents can become proud about it. Some kind of an ego thing where, oh, my daughter, she's she's this great financial analyst. She earns this and that. Or who knows what? My son is famous. He's an artista. And so you've got this a different goal, a different reason, which is, I would say, very, very natural and normal. Parents are looking out for the good of their children. They want the best for their children, and they should. Let's just not forget that in God, because of who we are as children of God, our goal must be disciple making. Not just in the church where the goal is disciple making, it is not an option, it is a command. Go and make disciples of all nations. We don't call that the Great Commission for nothing. This is the word that Jesus left behind for his church. Go and make disciples. So disciple making is something we need to have in mind as parents. So that's always there, okay? I've been through everything like waking up my daughters for Sunday. That was always a challenge. So, but that's part of parenting. Uh, I still remember my younger daughter um, always with me whenever we had youth meetings. Later on, I don't know how she did that, but she somehow was able to communicate to me that, Dad, I always go with you because I know I have to go with you. I've got to be there. And so somehow, I don't know, I never said it outright to her, but she got the message that there was no backing out. I knew at the time that many of our younger people, they wait until just before the youth meeting, um, checking to see if there's anything more exciting. And there were some of them who would only come if there was nothing else. No party invitation, no greater event to go to. Then youth meeting became the way to get out of the house. we would go through all of that. That's part of the process. But disciple making, the way we approach our parenting, in the uh, in the knowledge that even this daily um, activity of parenting is to be done for God. Anyway, let's go to slaves now, the focus, and I'll spend much more time here. Um, After saying that we glorify God in our relationship to children and grandchildren when we make sure we are raising disciples for Christ, we move on to the slaves. In the apostles' time, the writing of Ephesians, slaves would be the majority of the population. There were more slaves than the normal freedmen. The freedmen would sometimes even be poorer than the slaves. Uh, Many slaves were very highly educated. They were the tutors of the children of the noblemen. But the smallest group would be the higher ranking aristocrats, the super rich and super powerful people in society. So slaves were probably also the most numerous in churches. So if in a house church there would be, let's just say, 30 people, then a good 20 people may actually be slaves. So Paul writing to slaves in the church, verse 5, slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart. I think I should just share my screen here, and I hope I can. Let me try. Whoops. Do you see Ephesians there or not? You do? Great. So, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5 to 8. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect, just as you would obey Christ. Paul is bringing in the idea of working and the idea of saying you're slaves of Christ, doing the will of God. Can you imagine that? The slave is working his daily job, and he is told by the Apostle Paul that you are doing the will of God, and you need to do it from your heart. Verse 7, serve wholeheartedly. Again, as if you were serving the Lord. It's like you're serving the Lord. Can you imagine how that transforms the job of the slave? Imagine the slave whose job is sweeping the floor. So you're sweeping the floor, and the words of the Apostle Paul are fresh on your mind, telling you you are serving the Lord. Obey, obey, just as though you're a slave of Christ. And then verse 8 makes it even more broad and general, because you know that the Lord will reward each one for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. So, uh, the potential for people like us today reading these verses is that we may start to get the idea that we can glorify God every day. We can glorify God when we are in the office, the factory, in the car, at home, in school, or if you're really that young, maybe you're in preschool. Okay? It has the potential, that kind of potential, to begin to um, change the idea that we only worship God and honor Him, glorify Him on Sundays. And there begins what an old professor of mine said, TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. Somebody who goes to work and says, yes, here is another way I can glorify, please God. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to propose, that whether or not we are witnessing at work, whether or not there's gospel music piped into our office while we are typing away, we can glorify God. And that's because what we do can glorify Him. As a courier, going back now to that year where the farthest I delivered was Mississauga, um, I look back now and ask, did I glorify God in taking that package to Mississauga? Well, courier drivers and all transport people, what we actually do is um, take something that is produced by someone created by God. We take these goods and transport them, bring them to other people who need those goods. In other words, we make sure that the city, the community works properly. In our days, right now that we're going through this pandemic, um, we begin to appreciate, I think, more fully the the person who delivers to us, whether they call themselves Uber or oh, what are those different people? Um, who are those who deliver food all the time? They come to my house too, but I don't do the ordering. Yeah, they go from from restaurant to your doorstep. We've been using that a lot these days.
Or Eats, Pastor.
Oh, okay. And there's more, right? There's
Yes, DoorDash.
yeah, there's oh yeah, yeah. I know someone who works for DoorDash. Anyway, I'm gonna try to stop sharing the screen. Oh, don't worry. Let's just move down the screen. So, uh, here is Tim Keller, um, pastor in New York City, writing a book, Every Good Endeavor. And this title I can see comes from our Ephesians verse. He says, if the God of the Bible exists, blah, 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 then every good endeavor, every good work, even the simplest ones, pursued in response to God's calling, can matter forever. So if God has called you to be a carpenter, just like Jesus was, every time you hit that nail on the head, you are doing the will of God. That is, I think, radical because we tend to think of Jesus only in terms of the 3 years of his public ministry, which of course ended on the cross. But for many years before that, most likely he was what the Greek Bible would call a teknon. He was a contractor who went around, and if they needed somebody to lay bricks, he would probably lay a brick. If they needed somebody to dig a trench or a ditch, then that's what he would do. Contractors, teknons, were kind of able to do a lot of things, including carpentry. So that's what he would have been doing in Nazareth and those the bigger cities are around Nazareth, which was a very small place. Okay, now you have to respond, and I'll try to figure out how I can manage what I'm doing here. Okay, here we go. Does everybody see the red job classifications I've written down? Wave your hand if you've seen that. Yes. And now, as we go through my list of 15, this is not complete at all. I'd like you to respond by waving at me like very, very clearly if I've happened to mention your work. Okay? I started right away with the retired, the student, and the little children because the children's work is to play. And so, if you're retired already, would you just wave at your screen and say, "Here I am. This is my present occupation." Number two is homemaking. Whether you're doing that for your own household or you support someone else in their home life. I know support workers who go from home to home. Wave your hand. Uh, your church mates would know if that's where you belong. Hospitality. In our church here in Surrey or Delta, we've got lots of hotel workers, um, restaurant workers, chefs. I could really appreciate if somebody is a chef. I really love their product. And even if you're in fast food, to me that blows me away how quickly people work. Anyway, number four includes my own family, health. So you're either in acute or long-term care, and there's others, hospital workers. That includes so many different things. And then dentists would be included. I see my dentist every 6 months, and thank God for my dentist. Otherwise, anyway, uh, we have psych workers as well in mental health, med techs, medical imaging. You've got veterinarians. Oh, um, many people from the Philippines start to have pets at home um, here in Canada. Um, yeah, we used to have lots of pets, but that's a little more difficult here, and you need a vet. Anyway, number five, Would you be in construction, maintenance, and repair? You just wave at your screen like that. Okay? I would include mechanics here and even those who clean. Um, we have professional cleaners in our congregation here. Uh, so I'm looking now at something very broad, includes so many things. Production, that's the manufacture of goods. And I would say a bakery is producing uh, bread. Anyway, so number 7, that's the couriers there, transport and delivery, including people who um, go up in the air, the pilots, stewards, and stewardesses, uh, and those who keep them going, like those who repair and maintain. Our postal worker comes to my door every day. Anyway, sales and finance. Are you in sales and finance, including, just as a joke, maniningil? Maniningil ng utang? Are you that professional? Anyway, just kidding. Number 9, communication and entertainment. Wow, I love this category. It's really big. It includes my daughter. Um, uh, so, broadcasting, huh? Are you in information technology or whatever? Number 10, education. Ooh, that includes, I would put scientists and researchers there, people that we really need now. We see the importance of science and research when this new virus was introduced into the human population. Suddenly you needed somebody who understands genetics, virology, ooh, population dynamics. Oh, there was so much that was needed. Statisticians were very important. Anyway, 11, we have today our worship leader in our church is a policeman. So justice and correctional workers, firefighters, I would just lump in soldiers. Okay. Number 12, agriculture. Aha. Fisheries. 13, event planners. Oh, we need to pray for them. They've lost so much in this pandemic. Uh, urban planners, I would include there. And then those who are working in government. That's a lot. That's auditors. And that's people from PM as in Prime Minister or PM as in part-time mechanic. Lots of people are employed by our government. And finally, 15, assisting occupations, and there's a huge number of different people who just assist. They simply make things possible by supporting. And so I haven't even included myself here. I haven't listed evangelists and pastors and people who do illegal work and people who are likely not with us on Zoom because they're out at sea. Anyway, so you've got uh, lots of people not in this list, and I want to check. Um, can somebody take me off this share screen? Oh, here I can do it myself, I think, right there. How is there anyone here who can wave their hand at me and say, you did not mention my line of work, Pastor. You missed me. Okay, I love to do that. This is a challenge. As I made this list, would you just wave like this? Help me to see that I did not do it perfectly. Oh, wow, wow. I never thought that I could make a complete list. This was, it seemed impossible to me. And you would notice that the list had lots of overlap. You could have found yourself in more than one category. And so my apologies, Pastor June and myself, we are there too. Number 16, okay? Uh, Pastors and evangelists are there too. Anyway, so the point is simple. You can glorify God every day. Allow me to share the screen, I hope one last time. Uh, there you go. And I hope I'm sharing the right one. You can glorify God every day. And we need to balance that statement a little bit. We are not saying that our mission is no longer disciple making. No, no, no. What we are saying is that while Paul, the Apostle Paul, was making tents, he was glorifying God. Just as he was glorifying God when he was making disciples like Timothy, and if you remember that couple, Priscilla and Aquila, uh, that's how they're mentioned in the book of Acts. The woman's name first, Priscilla and Aquila. Only one time does it go the opposite way. Anyway, and then when Paul was planting churches. All right. So, um, Paul, was he glorifying God when he was writing the book of Ephesians, the letter to the Ephesians? Of course he was. Was he glorifying God when instead of using his hand for writing, he was using it for a needle and making a tent? Did the moment that he stopped writing and he started tent making, did he stop glorifying God? Was God no longer pleased? I challenge us with this because it's so easy to think that right now we are in a worship service and we are pleasing God by our activity, but later on, when we bring our children to the park, oh, that's not the same. And then following day, let's just say we get on the bus and start driving the bus, and we begin to feel that somehow we are doing less of glorifying God, when in fact we are actually taking God's creatures, people who God created, who now live in cities, who need to go from one place to another. We are serving the people that God created. We are driving this bus on God's earth. This is God's created world. And most importantly, you, the bus driver, you are a child of God. And so I would say this, I would argue that when the bus driver prays, Lord, please protect us as myself and my passengers go around the city today, he is glorifying God just as much as when on Sunday he will pray, Lord, help us as we worship you today. To God, it is exactly the same. And so, let me end. It was deeply, deeply encouraging to me when around 15 years ago, for the very first time, I came to Fraser Valley Alliance Church as an invited preacher. And I preached very similarly to what I did this morning. I said basically the same things. And then at the end of the service, when my usual experience is people saying, thank you, Pastor, that was great. Most people are very sincere, actually, but they are very broad and general when they talk. This one guy, he, he pulled me aside and said, Pastor, salamat. I am a long haul driver. I drive from here to the US, all the way to Texas and New York. And you've just told me, you've just told me something about my daily, nightly work. And I cannot forget that. Because that moment I felt that God's word had blessed someone. And now this someone was passing on the blessing by encouraging me. And I felt that God was at work that day. My prayer is that God is working right now, helping you to understand that what you're going to do later on today and the rest of the week has potential to glorify God. Would you just pray with me? Father, thank you for life, for giving us this life that includes not just body, but heart and soul and strength. And Lord, may you help your children to be aware and to remember that whatever they do, whether it's high tech or low tech, whether it's very restful or stressful, Lord, there is potential to honor you when we take your message to humble slaves, your message that says to all of us, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as though you are serving the Lord. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Help us, Lord, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Let me leave you with one final verse, because Paul also wrote to the Colossians, and he said this to the slaves. Slaves, obey your earthly masters. And then verse 23, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord. And then in verse 24, he says to slaves, it is the Lord Christ you are serving.